I have a lot of exes. No, I don't mean in terms of ex-girlfriends or ex-wives or ex-children. I mean just in terms of ex-life paths. So among them, we can count ex-personal trainer and bootcamp instructor, ex-matchmaker, ex-startup lawyer, yes, and even ex-wedding singer. These days, I run my own book publishing company, and we've sold over 1 million books. We've been translated into 14 different languages, and they're actually even available in Chinese in Taiwan. It seems like a pretty unlikely path, but I was able to walk this path because very early on, I was able to let go of this thing called expectations. And that's expectations around what I should be doing, what my life should look like. That's a pretty tough task for an immigrant family structure. It turns out that this concept of letting go of expectations is very similar to Stoicism. And Stoicism is an ancient Greek philosophy that was founded to basically help people deal with hardship. The most famous Stoic is Roman philosopher and emperor Marcus Aurelius, and Stoicism bears quite a resemblance to Taoism as well. So after I discovered Stoicism, it dramatically changed how I view my own happiness and fulfillment. So to that end, today I want to talk about 3 stories. There's the story of the archer, the dog, and the butterfly, and these all concern fulfillment, the concept of control, and the concept of expectations. So we have an archer. This archer is the best in the world. From the time he was little and he could barely pick up a bow and arrow, he's been practicing 5, 10 hours a day. He's better than Legolas. He wins every competition he goes to. So we have another competition on one day, and he takes his turn as usual. He steps up, he knocks an arrow back, and he lets go. What happens? The arrow strikes a bird. All right, these things happen. He takes another turn. So he steps up, he knocks the arrow back, and he lets go. This arrow is taken away by a mini hurricane. Okay, these things happen too. So on his 3rd and final attempt, he steps up, he knocks the arrow back, and he lets go. What happens this time? The arrow is struck by a bolt of lightning. These things happen? Well, how should the archer feel about this? In fact, the archer feels fine. The archer's happy, he's laughing. That's because the archer knows something that most of us do not know. And that is that once he lets go of the arrow, he loses complete literal and figurative control of the arrow. And that kind of reflects towards our lives as well, because we can't actually ever guarantee an outcome or a result. We actually shouldn't expect it because an outcome is never within our control. And yet, like the archer, he was happy because he knew he had shot the arrow well. So it turns out for us, it's the exact same thing. Doing our best is the best that we can do. And if we've done our best, then we should be happy. So that takes us to the next story. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus put it this way. He said that we should not want for things to happen as we wish. Instead, we should want for things to happen as they do. And this story is about amor fati. And amor fati is Latin for love of fate. And it reminds us to love where we are, where we're going, and where we end up. So we have this dog, he's fallen asleep, he's tired, and he wakes up, jarred awake suddenly. He's unfortunately tied to a cart, a moving cart that's going left, except the dog wants to go right very badly. And yet, so the dog thinks to himself, I think I only have 2 options. I think I can run with the cart to the left, or I think I can be dragged by the cart to the left. So he decides to want to go left. It's a very easy decision. And surprisingly to the dog, once he makes that decision, suddenly he's not unhappy anymore. And that's because he can see what he can do if he chooses to go left, if he chooses to make the best of it, if he chooses to make that choice. This brief story tells us that actually all the events in our lives, whether we think they're good or they're bad, they are actually neutral. We assign them value based on how we feel and our perspective, but that turns out to be something that we can control, just like the dog who didn't want to go to the left, but changed his perspective suddenly when he chose to want to go that way. However, that's only if, and this is the caveat, that's only if people are able to let go of must, should, have to. All these expectations, all these preconceptions of what they think should be happening. Only then can we learn to let go and love our fate and love where we are. And that's why 2 people, for instance, they get in the same car accident. They're in the same car. They're both injured exactly the same. Their prognosis is exactly the same. And yet one can be happy, one can be sad, one can be upbeat, and one can be depressed. Because it's a matter of choosing your own perspective. And that takes us to the third story, and this is a story that was originally a poem, actually, by the Taoist philosopher named Zhuangzi. So this is called The Butterfly Dream, and it goes something like this. Zhuangzi the philosopher, one hazy afternoon, he fell asleep, took a nap. In this nap, in this dream, he was dreaming that he could fly, he could float on flowers, he could see the world through the eyes of the tiny butterfly. When he awoke, there was a moment of massive confusion because the dream was so realistic. Was he Zhuangzi the human, or was he now the butterfly's dream? The butterfly dreaming that he instead was a human. At that moment, Zhuangzi also realized that maybe it didn't matter because no matter which it was, he couldn't control it. He couldn't have the expectation to be something that he was not. So he was just going to accept it and make the best of what he could. You see, in life, most of the time, we only have two choices. We can accept or we can struggle. We can accept what we have and what we don't have, or we can struggle to get something that we will never have. So the point of these three stories is not to stop desire, because desire is arguably the most human instinct of all. It's actually to stop desiring things we don't have and only desire what we have. And that's a massive perspective change. If you think about it, there's kind of a cultural worldwide understanding around this, because we can go to Chinese, 听天由命, English, fate willing, God willing, Arabic, inshallah, Spanish, primero Dios. These all hold the same meaning that we've done what we can, we've done our best, and now it's not in our hands anymore, we can't control it, and we just have to see what happens. So thankfully, there was this collective understanding, because that's what helped me through my unlikely path. Maybe we can say that there were three turns, just like the three stories. The first turn, when I left law to become a writer, I was okay with it because I knew I had shot my arrow well. I had done my research, I had reached out and found a plethora of mentors, and I had honed my writing craft. For the second turn, I had to run with the cart, and that's when I transitioned from a writer into a publisher. A writer is focused on creativity and expressiveness. A publisher, on the other hand, is focused on revenue and the bottom line. So that was a large change of mindset that I had to take. For the third and final turn, when I left the US to travel full-time just about 4 years ago, I embraced the butterfly dream, because it doesn't matter where my existence is, if it's in the US and California, if it's in Taipei, if it's in South America, if it's in Sweden or Europe, you just have to make the best of where you are, and you can't keep thinking about somewhere else and what these other places could be like for you. On a broader scale, the reason I want to talk about these three stories and expectation is because there's definitely a culture of, we can call it perpetual dissatisfaction, and this is especially among so-called high achievers. For some reason, we feel that we are pressured to do things, whether it's from our family, our peers, our culture, ourselves somehow. And then we want to accomplish things just for accomplishment's sake, right? We have these expectations on ourselves. Where do they come from? Do they matter? Have they ever? Will they ever? Arguably no. So remember at the beginning that I told you I had a lot of X's. I would say the most important X that I ever shed was expectations.